Welcome to Tales from Sector 9, your portal to immersive sci-fi audio stories. If you enjoy deep space action, rogue AIs, and conspiracy theories, you're in the right place. Tap like and subscribe to keep the adventures coming. Drop a comment and tell us where in the galaxy you're listening from. Now, sit back, relax, and prepare for tonight's story. Ghost Asset 7. The helicopter began falling before the pilot had time to finish saying, "We've lost navigation." For one absurd second, Nadia Vesper thought he meant they were lost in the ordinary sense. A bad coordinate, a failing transponder, a white horizon confusing the instruments. They were 20 minutes from the offshore platform, skimming low over Greenland's western fjords, the world beneath them sealed in winter iron. Beyond the glass, the Arctic was all depthless blue shadow and wind-scoured ice. The sun had not risen so much as bruised the edge of the sky. Then every screen in the cockpit went black. The pilot cursed in Danish. The co-pilot slapped switches. Somewhere behind Nadia, one of the other journalists shouted a prayer that turned into a scream. The storm arrived like a door opening. A wall of white slammed across the windshield. The helicopter bucked sideways. The cabin lights flickered. Nadia's stomach lifted into her throat as the machine dropped hard enough to make the seat harness cut into her collarbone. She had covered pipeline fires in Alberta, illegal drilling operations off Brazil, methane blowouts in Siberia. She had stood close enough to burning oil to feel her eyelashes stiffen from heat. She knew fear. She knew professional fear, useful fear. The kind that sharpened questions and made sources underestimate how much she'd already learned. This was different. This was the body knowing the mind had fallen behind. The pilot shouted something about rotor torque. The words came strangely slow. Nadia saw the emergency axe bolted near the door, the loose strap under the cameraman's seat, the fuel warning light, the way the co-pilot's right hand trembled before he reached for the radio. She knew, with a calm that was not hers, that he would not make the call. The helicopter struck the fjord at an angle. Metal screamed. Ice rose into the cabin like white glass. The world became impact, cold, black water, and a sound like mountains splitting open. Nadia woke beneath a sheet of blue. At first she thought she was underwater, staring up through a frozen lake at daylight trapped beyond reach. Then pain returned and corrected her. She was inside the crushed cabin, half submerged in freezing slush, her left arm pinned under a twisted frame strut. The helicopter lay canted on its side. The dead hung from their harnesses around her, their faces peaceful in the cruel way of things that had ended too quickly. Her breath came in small, torn pieces. The cold was already inside her. A voice in her mind said, "Count exits," not a thought, a command. Nadia looked. Main cabin door, buckled inward. Cockpit window, shattered but blocked by ice. Rear service panel, warped, possible. Distance, 4 meters. Obstacles, 2 bodies, luggage, exposed wiring, fuel vapor. She stopped. She had not meant to do that. Her hand moved before she decided to move it. She braced her boot against the strut, twisted her pinned arm in a precise angle, and felt something in her shoulder shift with a sickening pop. She nearly blacked out. She bit her own tongue and tasted blood. Then she pulled free. By the time the Danish rescue cutter found her, she'd crawled 20 meters across the fjord ice, dragging a broken satellite case behind her without knowing why. They reached her in orange survival suits, voices muffled by wind and masks, and she watched them arrive with the detached interest of someone reading a report about herself. One rescuer knelt beside her. "You're safe," he said in English. Nadia tried to answer. Her mouth formed a sentence she did not understand. The rescuer froze. She saw his eyes change. Later, aboard the cutter, wrapped in thermal blankets under lights too bright for human mercy, Nadia learned she had answered him in Russian. She did not speak Russian. At least she did not remember speaking it. They scanned her first because they thought she might have a concussion, then because no one could find her passport, then because the rescue commander, a compact Greenlandic Dane named Inuk Mathisen, had begun looking at her with professional unease. Facial recognition, no match. Fingerprint database, no match. Retinal scan, no match. Mathisen ran the scans again through a military channel. Nadia sat barefoot on a steel examination cot, teeth clicking, watching his face rather than the screen. She had spent 15 years studying faces across conference tables and embassy corridors. Men lied differently when they thought they were powerful. Women lied differently when they knew power had already failed them. Bureaucrats lied by becoming very still. Mathisen became very still. The screen flashed once. Ghost asset. 7. Status. Decommissioned clearance denied. The room lost all sound except for the low engine throb of the cutter. Nadia stared at the words. "That's not me," she said. Mathisen looked at the scar at the base of her skull. The one she had always assumed came from a childhood bicycle accident in Portland. His voice dropped until it was almost hidden beneath the machinery. "You should not exist." The second helicopter arrived 9 minutes later. It carried no markings. That was when Nadia understood the rescue had ended. 4 men came aboard in black cold-weather gear. No insignia, no national flag. Clean weapons held low, not threatening anyone because they didn't need to. Their leader spoke quietly to Mathisen in Danish. Mathisen refused him. The man showed him something on a sealed device. Mathisen's face changed again. Nadia sat behind a half-open infirmary door and watched the reflection in a stainless steel cabinet. The leader said in English, "Alive if possible." Mathisen said, "This is a civilian rescue vessel." "Not anymore." The next 30 seconds belonged to someone else. Nadia took the scalpel from the instrument tray. She did not remember standing. She did not remember crossing to the door. She remembered only a cold mathematics of bodies and angles. First man's wrist, second man's knee, weapon sling caught under elbow, muzzle away, strike throat but not fatal. Move before the room understands. When she stopped moving, one man was unconscious. One was choking on the floor, and she had a pistol in her hand. She stared at it in horror. The weapon sat against her palm as if it had known her longer than any human being. Mathisen stood frozen. Nadia whispered, "What am I?" He didn't answer, so she ran. The cutter's lower deck smelled of diesel, wet rope, and old fish. Alarms began to pulse red against the walls. Nadia moved through maintenance corridors without knowing how she knew where they led. Twice she chose a turn before signage appeared. Once she ducked under a pipe a full second before steam burst from a valve behind her. In a communications alcove she found the leader's drop tablet clipped to his harness. It opened under her thumbprint. That frightened her more than the crash. Inside were travel records: Syria, Estonia, Macau, Iceland, Svalbard, Siberia. Dates stacked across the last 12 years like a life she'd never lived. There were photographs of her entering hotels, boarding aircraft, walking beside men she didn't know through ports and military checkpoints. Her hair changed colour, her posture changed. Sometimes she wore glasses. Sometimes she looked directly into surveillance cameras with a cold, flat expression that made her stomach turn. At the bottom of the file, Program, Ghost Asset Initiative Designation, 7 Cover, Occupation, Journalist Function, Behavioral Infiltration, Specialist. Nadia held the tablet until the words blurred. Then gunfire cracked above her. She climbed through a service hatch onto the cutter's outer deck. The Arctic hit her like a physical sentence. Wind shoved the breath from her lungs. Across a narrow gap, a supply ship sat moored alongside, its cranes locked in ice, its crew shouting confusion into the storm. Nadia jumped. For one suspended second, she hung between vessels over black water. Then she landed badly, rolled, and felt something tear in her side. Behind her, men shouted. Ahead, the supply ship's cargo bay yawned open like a mouth. She vanished into it. By dawn, she was hidden inside a container filled with drilling insulation, sailing south through a sea so dark it looked older than the sky. She had the tablet, a pistol with 5 rounds, a stolen parka, and no country on earth that would admit she belonged to it. For 2 days she did what she'd always done. She researched. The tablet contained fragments, never the whole. Mission logs behind dead links, financial files with redacted beneficiaries, satellite maps of Arctic shipping corridors, a phrase repeated across encrypted memos, polar veil. Whenever she slept, memories came loose. A hotel room in Tallinn, rain on old glass, a man kneeling with his hands zip-tied behind him while Nadia asked in perfect Russian where the server farm was, a Syrian oil field burning at night, flames crawling up into heaven, her own voice saying, "Leave the western valve intact, they need to blame the militia." A submarine control room lit in green, someone whispering, "If Moscow sees the same ghost we show Washington, they'll both move." And always, the voice. The world only changes when markets panic. When the supply ship reached Iceland, Nadia walked off wearing a mechanic's coat and carrying a forged crew pass she had no memory of creating. Reykjavik greeted her with rain, sodium lights, and crowds that seemed offensively alive. People bought coffee, dragged luggage, complained into phones. A boy laughed at a dog slipping on wet pavement. A young couple kissed beneath an awning. Ordinary lives continued with indecent confidence. Nadia found a public terminal in a ferry office and searched herself. Nadia Vesper, investigative journalist. Articles existed. Interviews existed. Conference panels. Awards. A biography. A photograph of her at 34 accepting a climate reporting prize in Berlin. She called the newspaper where she'd worked for 6 years. A receptionist transferred her twice. Finally, a senior editor answered, irritated and breathless. "It's Nadia," she said. "I need you to listen carefully." Silence. Nadia who? She laughed once because the alternative was making a sound that would never stop. Nadia Vesper. "I'm sorry," he said. "I don't know that name." "You published my Arctic series?" "No, we didn't." "I sat in your office. You hated the second paragraph. You said it read like a funeral sermon." "I think you have the wrong number." She called a former source in Brussels. No answer. A photographer she had travelled with in Alaska. Number disconnected. A woman in Oslo who had once slept beside her for 3 warm weeks and told her she was too lonely to be as famous as she wanted. The woman answered, listened, then said with careful kindness that they had never met. By evening, Nadia found the apartment listed as her residence. A man with 2 children lived there. He showed her the lease. His name had been on it for 9 years. Outside, in an alley smelling of rain and restaurant grease, Nadia opened the tablet again. One of the hidden files had unlocked after her last call, as if grief itself had been an authentication layer. Inside was a folder labelled Personal Reinforcement, birth certificate, school records, diploma, photographs. Nadia scrolled through her own childhood. A girl with dark blonde hair smiling beside a birthday cake. The same girl on a bicycle. The same girl in a graduation gown. Her mother's face indistinct in several images, always turned slightly away, as if embarrassed by the camera. At first she did not see it. Then she enlarged the photographs. In every image Nadia's smile was identical. Not similar. Identical. Same angle. Same curvature. Same small tension at the left corner of the mouth. a smile copied and pasted through a life. Something inside her folded. She slid down the alley wall, tablet clutched against her chest, and wept without sound. Not because her past had been stolen, because there might have been no past to steal. Near midnight, a message appeared on the tablet. Weather Station H12, Eastern Iceland. Come alone. Trust only what you touch. No signature. She went because despair had left no safer option. Station H12 had been abandoned after the funding cuts of 2034, when predictive climate systems convinced governments they could replace half the human observers in the Arctic with drones, satellites, and cheerful lies about efficiency. It sat on a basalt ridge above a black beach, windows boarded, antennae bent under years of ice. The front door was locked. Nadia broke in through the roof. Inside, the station smelled of mildew and old coffee. Solar batteries hummed weakly beneath the floor. She moved through rooms filled with dead instruments until she found the operations centre. Someone had restored power. A monitor waited. When Nadia touched the keyboard, the screen woke. The video began without sound. She saw herself standing in that same room 3 years earlier. Not herself. A version of herself. Hair cropped short. Eyes dry and expressionless. Wearing a black thermal uniform without markings. Around her stood 5 operatives. On the wall behind them glowed a map of the Arctic marked with red points. Cables, drone routes, military listening arrays, research stations, fuel depots. In the video, Nadia pointed to a Russian installation near Franz Josef Land. Minimal casualties, she said. Maximum attribution ambiguity. They must believe NATO used a contractor cutout. One of the operatives asked, "And if the Americans deny it?" "They will. That's the point." The room in the video laughed softly. Nadia backed away from the monitor. "No," she said. The video continued. Her recorded self turned toward the camera. "Polar veil requires patience. We are not starting a war. We are teaching nations to anticipate one. Once anticipation becomes doctrine, escalation will operate without us." A floorboard creaked behind her. Nadia spun, pistol raised. A man stood in the doorway with his hands visible. Late 50s, narrow face, grey beard trimmed close, eyes ruined by sleeplessness. He wore a patched expedition jacket and looked like someone who had once believed in systems until systems gave him a reason not to. "My name is Jonas Rook," he said. "I helped make you." Nadia fired. The bullet struck the doorframe beside his head. Rook did not flinch. "That was fair," he said. She kept the pistol on him. "Start talking." He stepped inside slowly. "You were never supposed to wake up on the cutter. You were supposed to disappear before anyone scanned you." "Who am I?" His face tightened. "That is the wrong question." She crossed the room fast, shoved him against the wall and pressed the pistol under his jaw with a competence that made her hate her own hands. "Then give me the right one." He looked at her not with fear but with grief. "What did they need you to become?" The station lights flickered. Outside, wind scraped ice against the walls. Rook told her. Not all at once. Not cleanly. The truth came in pieces because it had been built that way. The Ghost program had begun as a government intelligence experiment after the authentication collapse of the early 2030s, when forged video, synthetic biometrics, and behavioural modelling made traditional espionage nearly obsolete. Instead of stealing identities, the program created them. Human beings with full digital histories, reinforced memories, implanted habits, and adaptive loyalties. "Not clones," Rook said. "Not machines. People. But people assembled from curated experience." "Where did you get me?" His silence answered before he did. There were neurological candidates, adults with no stable family records. Some came from disaster zones, some from prisons no one admitted existed, Some volunteered without understanding the contract. Which was I? I don't know. She almost shot him again for that. Rook looked at the monitor, where her colder self remained frozen mid-command. You were the 7th successful construct. The best. You could enter climate conferences, military briefings, corporate retreats. People underestimated you. They spoke freely. You listened. You nudged. You sabotaged. You vanished. My journalism, partly real, later. The cover needed reinforcement. You began doing the work. Real work. Good work. You invented my life. Yes. My mother. Yes. My degrees. Yes. My favourite books. He closed his eyes. Yes. She felt the room tilt. I remember reading them. I know. My first apartment. Designed. The lake where I learned to swim. Composite memory. She whispered. The woman in Oslo? Rook looked away. Nadia understood. A manufactured heartbreak. A wound installed so she would seem more human in interviews. So loneliness would sit naturally in her body. So sources would trust the sadness in her face. Rook said, not everything was false. She laughed, and the sound was uglier than crying. That's what men say when they want the ruins to look like shelter. I'm not asking forgiveness. Good. I'm asking you to stop the trigger. The word cut through her rage. What trigger? Rook crossed to the map and touched a point north of Svalbard. Deep ocean sensor station. Black multinational infrastructure. Officially seismic monitoring. Unofficially submarine traffic. Drone corridors. Undersea cables. Every major power watches its data without admitting they watch it. And Helios has prepared a telemetry injection. When uploaded, Russia sees NATO submarines crossing a restricted line. NATO sees Russian response preparations. China sees the corridor closing and moves to secure shipping assets. Each system confirms the others. Nobody fires first because everyone believes they are already responding. Nadia stared at the map. How long? Less than 20 hours. Why? Rook's expression hardened into something older than guilt. Because stability is bad for certain portfolios. Helios Consortium. She'd seen the name in the files. Energy corporations, private equity, rare earth extraction, shipping, defence logistics. The companies that profited when nations panicked and called it preparedness. Polar Veil wasn't political, she said. No, it was financial. The monitor behind them changed. A live feed appeared. 6 armed figures moving through the station's lower entrance. Rook sighed. They found us sooner than I hoped. Nadia checked the pistol. 2 rounds. Rook opened a cabinet and removed a compact rifle sealed in oilcloth. She looked at him. He gave a tired half smile. I wrote your college essays. I did not forget how to shoot. The attack lasted 4 minutes. It felt longer because the station died room by room. Lights burst. Glass shattered inward. Gunfire punched holes through weather charts and old insulation. Nadia moved through darkness with Rook at her back, hating how perfectly they worked together. He covered blind corners before she reached them. She reloaded from a dead contractors magazine without looking. In the stairwell, a man swung a rifle toward her, and she broke his elbow with the edge of a fire extinguisher, then apologised under her breath because that at least felt like hers. They escaped through a drainage culvert into weather so violent it erased the station behind them. On the ridge, Rook handed her a drive. "Fail-safe access," he said. "You built it into the sensor station before they wiped you." "I did." "You found the final phase. You tried to expose Helios." "Then why don't I remember?" "Because they cut the rebellion out of you." Below them, the station erupted in orange flame. The blast threw Rook to his knees. Nadia grabbed him. He pushed her away and looked past her toward the snowfield. Red dots moved through the white. "Go." "No. You need a vessel to Svalbard. There's an icebreaker leaving the eastern harbour under Norwegian contract. Name is Northern Lantern. Captain owes me a debt." You're coming." He touched her face once, not as a handler, not as a creator, but as a man seeing the consequence of his life. "I built every memory that made you laugh," he said. "Let me at least choose what this one means." Then he turned and fired into the storm. Nadia ran until the gunfire disappeared. The northern lantern left harbour under a sky filled with low clouds and military traffic. By then, the world had begun to move. Nadia watched from the icebreaker's communications room as alerts cascaded across open channels. Russian submarines repositioning near the Barents Shelf. American surveillance aircraft rerouting north. Chinese commercial convoys requesting naval escort along the polar corridor. Markets trembling before the first shot was even imagined. Energy futures jumped 11% in 40 minutes. Defence stocks climbed. Shipping insurance rates tripled. Nobody called it war. Not yet. They called it risk. The captain, a broad woman named Astrid Fane, looked at the reports and said, "Risk has killed more people than bullets." Nadia stood wrapped in borrowed wool, Rook's drive hanging from a cord around her neck. "I need to reach the sensor station," Astrid snorted. "Everyone needs something. If I don't, they'll use its data to start an escalation chain." "Who is they?" Nadia almost said Helios. Instead she said, "The people who make money when maps turn red." Astrid studied her for a long moment. Then she said, "You have the eyes of someone who has been hunted by professionals. I have the hands too. That is less comforting." They were 12 hours from the station when Viktor Saranov came aboard by helicopter. He arrived with 4 Russian naval officers and the politeness of a drawn blade. 49, square-shouldered, clean-shaven, his eyes the pale green of old bottle glass. He removed his gloves finger by finger in the galley while Astrid argued maritime law at him in 3 languages. Saranov ignored her and looked at Nadia. "Go 7, he said. Nadia didn't move. He switched to Russian. "You do understand me?" "I wish I didn't." "So do many Russians." His humour was dry enough to be almost invisible. "You're coming with me," he said. "No. You're a strategic weapon involved in attacks on my country's infrastructure. I'm trying to stop the next one. Every weapon says this when held by the wrong hand." Nadia stepped closer. "Your brother died near Murmansk in 2035 after a navigation spoof caused 2 patrol craft to collide in fog. You blamed NATO contractors. You spent 3 years hunting the source. You found fragments of polar veil but not Helios. You think taking me in will give you proof." For the first time, Saranov's control cracked. "How do you know this?" "I don't know." Her voice shook despite herself. "That's the problem." Saranov stared at her as if seeing not a person but a doctrine made flesh. Then the ship's alarm sounded. Contractors came over the stern in the dark. They wore thermal masking gear and carried weapons designed for close work in bad weather. The first explosion disabled the aft crane. The second killed the lights. The northern lantern rolled hard as waves struck her flank and froze along the railings in jagged white armour. The fight moved across the deck under emergency strobes. Nadia slipped twice on blood glazed with ice. A contractor drove her against a winch housing hard enough to break something in her ribs. She jammed her thumb into the gap beneath his visor and felt his body recoil. Saranov shot the man before he could recover. They stood back to back while wind tore at them. "I am not your ally," he shouted. "Then stop saving me." "I am saving the situation. Name it whatever helps." A grenade bounced across the deck. Nadia saw it, calculated distance, knew neither could reach cover. Astrid's fire axe knocked it overboard an instant before it blew a crater in the sea. The captain looked at Nadia. "Your friends are unpleasant." "I don't have friends." Astrid nodded towards Saranov. "You may have one by accident." By dawn, the attackers were dead or gone. Saranov had lost 2 officers. Astrid had lost 3 crew. The ship continued north with a damaged radar mast and a hull groaning under ice pressure. In the communications room, Saranov played an intercepted transmission. A man's voice, smooth and intimate, filled the speakers. 7. You are moving toward a door you cannot close. Come home. Nadia knew that voice. The world only changes when markets panic. Aurelian Price, Saranov said, Helios strategic director, untouchable, advises governments he destabilizes. On the screen, a live market model bloomed into view. Oil, gas, rare earths, shipping insurance, defense procurement, sovereign bond volatility. Beside each line, projected profit. Nadia felt something colder than the Arctic settle inside her. They're already pricing the deaths, Saranov said. Markets price everything. No, she said. People do. Then they blame the market so they can sleep. The undersea sensor station rose from the ice like an accident no one wanted recorded. Most of it lay below the shelf, anchored into black water, but its access tower stood on the surface, a narrow carbon spine wrapped in frost, lights blinking blue through blowing snow. No flags, no markings, infrastructure belonging to everyone and therefore answerable to no one. The northern lantern could not approach closer than 2 kilometres. The ice was too broken. Nadia crossed by crawler with Saranov and 2 of Astrid's crew, the world reduced to headlamps, engine growl, and the endless hiss of snow against armour glass. Halfway there, the sky lit green. Aurora moved above them in silent curtains. Nadia watched it and remembered a birthday she had never had. A woman's hand pointing upward. A child's voice asking if the lights were alive. The memory hurt. Then she made a choice. She let it go. Not because it was false, because truth had become too small a container for what it had given her. The access tower opened under Rook's Drive. Inside, the station descended through the ice in a spiral of steel stairs and blue emergency lighting. The air grew warmer as they went down, then sterile. Machines hummed inside the walls, no windows, no wind, no day or night. Just data moving through cables thick as wrists. At the central operations chamber, the world waited on screens, submarine tracks, seismic readings, drone corridors, satellite confirmations, military readiness indexes, a countdown timer, upload authorization, pending 004712. Nadia inserted the drive. The system accepted her. Welcome, 7. Her hands hovered over the controls. Saranov watched from the door. Can you stop it? I don't know. That is not ideal. It's honest. Files opened in layers. She saw the telemetry package. Elegant, disciplined, almost beautiful in its cruelty. Not a crude fake. A self-supporting event. Each false signal reinforced by partial truths. Russian mobilization would validate NATO anxiety. NATO reaction would validate Chinese corridor fears. Chinese movement would validate Russian assumptions. The lie did not need to survive forever, only long enough for frightened men to obey procedure. Nadia began to delete it. The system refused. She tried to expose it. The station locked the transmission channel. Then she understood. Information could be manufactured. So could doubt. She did not need to replace the lie with truth. She needed to make every version untrustworthy. Nadia opened the raw sensor feed and began contaminating its authentication chain. She inserted contradictions too deep to ignore, impossible timestamps, mutually exclusive acoustic signatures, location drift beyond physical tolerance, metadata loops that pointed to every major power and none. She did not erase the false attack. She made the entire station confess uncertainty. Warnings erupted. Sensor integrity, failure authentication, collapse, multinational feeds suspended across the screens, military readiness models hesitated, then flattened. No commander could justify escalation from contaminated telemetry. No algorithm could recommend retaliation from poisoned data. The countdown vanished. For 7 seconds, no one spoke. Then a slow clap sounded from the upper gantry. Aurelian Price stepped into the blue light wearing an expedition coat too elegant for the end of the world. 60, silver-haired, calm as a surgeon. 2 armed guards flanked him. "Nadia," he said. "I always preferred that name for you. More resilient than the others." She turned from the console. Price looked at the corrupted feeds with genuine admiration. "You didn't reveal the truth. You attacked confidence. Very good. That was always your gift." Saranoff raised his weapon. Price's guards raised theirs. Everyone paused inside the delicate geometry of mutual death. Price smiled. "Colonel, if you shoot me, the financial releases go nowhere. Your government will receive only enough evidence to suspect betrayal, not enough to prove it. Ambiguity will do its work eventually." Nadia said, "You lost." "For today?" He shrugged. "History is patient when properly funded. People died. People always die. The only question is whether their deaths purchase anything. Profit. Acceleration." His voice warmed. He believed this. That was the horror. War built radar. War built satellites. War built medicine under pressure. War built the networks you mistake for civilization. Peace maintains. Fear invents. You engineered fear? Yes. Why? Because nations are children. They do not move until the floor burns. Nadia looked at the screens, at the suspended tracks of submarines turning slowly away from imagined enemies. "You don't want progress," she said. "You want leverage." Price's smile thinned. "You were extraordinary before guilt infected you. Come back. There are 6 others, but none with your adaptability." The word struck harder than any bullet. 6 others. Saranoff glanced at her. Price noticed and sighed with theatrical regret. "You didn't know. Rook always was sentimental." Nadia felt the old question rise in her. Who am I? For the first time she did not follow it. She reached behind her and touched the drive, still seated in the console. Price's eyes narrowed. "What did you do?" Nadia said. "I stopped asking for my original file." On the main screen, Helios transaction chains began unfolding, not into news feeds, not to journalists, to markets, to the blind predatory systems Helios had trusted more than governments, shell companies, defense bets, energy futures, shipping shorts, rare earth options, bribes nested, inside procurement models, insurance movements placed before sabotage events. Every algorithm built to detect advantage saw Helios bleeding certainty. Every exchange watchdog saw the same impossible pattern. Every government finance ministry received authenticated fragments at once. Price looked up at his empire becoming visible in the one place it could not survive visibility. "You released it into trading networks," he said. "You taught me markets move faster than truth." The first guard shifted. Saranoff shot him. The chamber erupted. Nadia dropped as bullets shattered the console above her. Price ran for the gantry. Saranoff took a round through the shoulder and kept firing, cursing in Russian with impressive specificity. Nadia tackled the second guard into a rack of fibre relays. Electricity snapped blue-white. The man convulsed once and fell. Price reached the emergency lift. Nadia caught him before the doors closed. They struggled inside the small metal cage as it began rising through the ice. Price was stronger than he looked, fueled by the animal outrage of a man who had mistaken wealth for destiny. He slammed her into the wall. Her ribs flared white. He got a hand around her throat. "You are not a person," he hissed. "You are intellectual property with trauma." Nadia's vision narrowed. For an instant she saw all her false lives. The copied smile, the invented mother, The stage diploma, the artificial heartbreak, the books Rook had chosen, the articles she had actually written, the coffee she had brought a climate scientist who hated sugar, the apology she had whispered to a man whose elbow she broke. Not truth, not lies, material. She drove her knee into Price's chest, hooked his wrist, and used the disarming motion her body knew better than memory. Bone cracked. He screamed. The lift doors opened onto the surface tower. Wind burst in. Price stumbled backward onto the ice. Nadia followed, holding his own sidearm. He looked at her then, really looked, and saw something his models had missed. Choice. "You won't kill me," he said. "No." Really flickered. She lowered the weapon. Behind him, lights approached across the ice. Not Helios, not his people. Astrid's crew, Saranov's remaining officer, drones bearing national markings from 3 countries, all suddenly interested in the same man. "I'm a journalist," Nadia said. "Apparently." Price understood at last. Death would have made him secret. Survival would make him evidence. When they took him, he did not look frightened. He looked offended by a world that had failed to remain purchasable. By morning, the Arctic crisis had become a technical anomaly, then a diplomatic pause, then a market scandal so vast that governments pretended to have suspected it all along. Ships turned back, aircraft landed, submarines descended into their private dark. The world did not learn how close it had come to war. Perhaps it could not have borne the knowledge. Saranov survived. Before evacuation, he stood beside Nadia at the edge of the access tower while medics argued behind him. "What will you do?" he asked. "Find out what's left." "That may be nothing." She watched snow fall into black water. "Nothing is a place to start." He gave her a small encrypted device. "If you discover ghosts inside my country, you'll arrest them. I will verify them." A pause. Then decide whether arrest is still a meaningful concept. It was the closest thing to tenderness he seemed able to offer. After he left, Nadia returned alone to the operations chamber. Most systems were locked down, but Rook's drive had opened one final archive. Ghost Asset Program. Subject: 7. Status: decommissioned/reactive. Original identity: none assigned. She read the last line 3 times. None assigned. No stolen girl, no hidden childhood, no true name waiting under the ice. The emptiness inside her was not amnesia, it was origin. Below the file sat another folder. Asset status: 1. Active. 2. Active. 3. Active. 4. Active. 5. Active. 6. Active. 7. Reactive. Nadia closed her eyes. For several minutes there was only the hum of machines and the distant groan of ice shifting against the station walls. Then she laughed once, softly. Not because it was funny, because some part of her had expected the truth to end the mystery. Outside, the northern lights moved above the Arctic Ocean in green. Silence. The sky looked less like heaven than an old wound refusing to close. Nadia climbed to the surface. Snow fell across the dark water. Her encrypted phone vibrated. A message appeared from an unknown source. "Welcome back, 7. Find the others before we do." She stared at the words until the screen dimmed. Then she looked north, toward the frozen horizon. "I don't know who I was," she said. The wind took the words. She smiled. This time the smile belonged to no file, no handler, no program, no market, no nation. "But I know who I won't be." Nadia Vesper turned away from the station and walked into the snow, not searching for the person she had been, but toward the person no one had designed. The Arctic closed behind her, and somewhere in the world 6 ghosts continued dreaming they were real.